does he say? He's like a retired clown.
Right. I like it. I'm setting up the live streaming right now. We're not like live just yet, but I'm just getting it all going just to make sure that it works. Oh, maybe we are live now. Okay.
It says that we are.
Okay, hold on. Does this mean we are on?
It looks like we're on.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
We're live. Leslie said we're live.
Oh, you don't like that? Too bad. So I'm going to work on. Now I'm seeing us twice. That's freaking me out a little. I'm not seeing the chat bar either. So I hope Annie edits this part later, because otherwise it's just you and me being like, mostly me, and you're just watching me. So let's see here. Okay. All right, so we'll see. We usually, as you've seen it, but you've jumped on before, so people will jump on and they'll start asking questions and stuff. And we'll just, answer them. And if if it's slow to start with the chatting, I will likely, just start asking you questions randomly.
Right. I mean, I have been impressed when I've watched the way that you're sort of able to just like talk for a straight hour, basically.
It's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I don't know if I could not wear the headphones, but you'll have to tell me how the sound is, okay? Okay.
It's fine on my end.
How is it now? Is it echoey and weird?
No.
Okay, well, let's just do that, because I don't need it, and then I look like way more official than I actually am with those. Like, it's like somehow it would create the sense that I know what I'm doing, and that's not true. So I was thinking I might pull it up on my phone, but we'll see. Let's see when people show up. Okay, I'm going to try to look for that. Give me a second. Yeah, I'm like, all kidding aside, like talking to nothing for extended periods of time with no one responding is like, it's a specific skill set that I'm not sure is super helpful, but I always did want to be like in talk radio or some kind of DJ. I wanted more to DJ.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, our high school had a radio station. It was very Saved by the Bell,
Yes.
And I got to do a radio show, but I always wanted to do it with someone else. Like, I'd so much rather you and I talk than just like me and, hold on, let's see if this works. Like, I'd so much rather you and I talk in front of a bunch of people than me talking by myself in front of a bunch of people. All right, there they go. Oh, look, there's Leslie. Leslie's with us. Okay, I can see Leslie's live chat. You cannot. We need to change that.
I can see it on YouTube.
Okay, do you have it?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right, I'm going to put that up there then. Oh, this is beyond exciting. Leslie, I'm so excited for you to get to know Kira. She's the real deal here. All right. Says I. For whatever that's worth. All right, here, let's see here. Oh, I got it. Oh, I've got the plan. We'll start the real conversation in 2 minutes. Yeah. This is all like preemptive. Have you done any like DJing or like TV interviews or like?
More like kind of podcasty stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Again, more like interview format where I'm the interviewee. So.
Do you like being on the spot and me interviewing you and asking all sorts of crazy questions?
No, I do. I mean, especially like when my book came out, like I was doing not like a lot of stuff, but definitely there were a few interviews that I did where I was let's just say that the interviewers were not sympathetic to my point.
Sure.
So that was the most tense, I think, or not tense, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I imagine they're like, well, so why are you trying to ruin the world?
Yeah.
Why do you hate Jesus in America, basically? And
why are you killing babies?
Why do you want to murder babies is basically the question that people start with. And by the way, that's always a way to start a really healthy dialogue between two people.
Yeah. And this fortunately wasn't that kind of interview, but it was definitely like, oh, like we are going to have some disagreements, and that's going to be not heated, but it was at least the conversations I've been a part of, especially if they're like part of a podcast or something, have all been in very like good faith.
Yeah, that's good.
So, it's like, okay, yeah, we're going to disagree, but like, there are also things that we can say like, hey, we do agree on like these things.
And I do think that we like don't know how to disagree anymore as people. I know that's, or maybe we never did. I don't know. I shouldn't say anymore because it creates this dynamic where we're talking about the good old days, which never were. But I don't know if we've like been appropriately trained to learn how to disagree, like with respect and love. Right. And so you get to that place where everyone has to be on the same page. It's the only way for there to be any civility. But that's not realistic.
Right.
If you've ever tried to live with someone for more than 5 minutes.
I know. Yeah. I love when people kind of are like, oh, well, I don't want to, be a part of this church or be a part of this community because like there's just too much disagreement or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know where you're going to go where there isn't disagreement,
Right. Good luck.
A matter of finding a place that can handle it in a constructive, healthy way, but like, you're not gonna find somewhere where everybody just kind of magically gets along unless you're like in a cult, and then that's not like valid.
Right. No, I mean, that's clearly not the thing. When I was I'll tell this one brief anecdote and then we'll get officially started. Because apparently we are on the air. And people are just watching and we're talking like they're not there. Which is my dream. No, but I used to, so in my former life, I wrote for the conservative journal at my college. And there was never more disagreement anywhere in my life than in that room. We would all sit around and everyone was wrong according to everybody else. And we were all like, and there was a very clear sense of connection and relationship there, but no one agreed with anybody because there was all different kinds of self-described. There was conservative and moderate and libertarian and religious and non-religious and all this stuff. And I mean, it was really intense and crazy. And I was like, wow, this is not at all monolithic. I don't talk much about my political leanings these days, but at the time I can talk safely about the past. Hey, okay. We're live. We're here. Welcome to Ask Two Priests. I did it with a 2, in honor of Prince, really. I hope you're okay with that.
It's fine with me.
If you're on, you probably know me because I've been doing this for a while. I'm Philip Duvall, Church of the Redeemer, but I have a guest today, and through the wonder and splendor of Zoom technology, I was able to invite my friend Kira. Kira, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kira Ospinian. I am the priest in charge of St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Nashville, and super grateful to Phil for inviting me on and looking forward to chatting with you all some more.
My friend Leslie says, ask two priests, ask priests too, Electric Boogaloo. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I want everyone, I've been thinking a lot about this show. So Kira, you've watched it before.
I have.
And no big deal. And no, but it is interesting to me when I was doing this, and then I'd find out that some of my friends and colleagues were watching, because then all of a sudden I'm like, oh gosh, am I representing us okay? And I think like the more, I love doing it. I love like being able to just talk with people, and I love responding to questions. But like something that I also realized is that like one thing that I think you and I have experienced, I'm guessing, you didn't grow up in the Episcopal Church, right?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, for some reason I didn't think you had. So you grew up in the Episcopal Church. So I come from another denomination, and I want to ask you a question.
Mhm.
Would you say your experience of the Episcopal Church growing up, or as you've come to know it, is that it's not that it privileges one voice, one person, like in the sense of like our tradition wants to hear from all different sorts of sources. Like, for instance, we don't just read Episcopalians. In fact, sometimes we should probably read some more people in the Anglican tradition. But you'll see in the Episcopal Church people reading across sort of, is that a fair sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so I grew up, I guess we'll kind of get right into like my life a little bit. I grew up in the Episcopal Church and then kind of did the like post-confirmation like exodus. And actually went to a United Methodist Church for a while with friends of mine and was very involved and did
because it was a cool youth group.
Yes, because it was a cool youth group. I mean, it was like where all my friends went. We went on ski trips, and I did handbell choir and regular choir and Sunday school and youth group and all the things. And then for my last 2 years of high school, I went to a Presbyterian church because I was in boarding school in Northern Michigan, and
like you do,
then came back to Texas. And my great uncle was an Episcopal priest, and he had died my senior year of high school. And so, sort of in honor of him, I decided to like give the Episcopal Church another try.
Oh, wow.
And got involved in campus ministry at Rice University in Houston. And the rest is history. It was like coming back home, and that really kind of I was like, oh, this is home.
Wow. And so you became an Episcopalian again, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Texas it's hard to give them a hard time because they just keep pumping out good priests. Now, were you ordained in Texas or were you ordained in Tennessee?
I was ordained through the Diocese of Texas.
Yes, of course. They have you. They've got you. Are you canonically resident in Tennessee now?
I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That took a little while, but I am canonically resident here now.
Fantastic. Not that there's anything wrong with Texas. You're in Tennessee, so I was trying to do the math on that one.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it was hard because I was definitely ordained through the Diocese of Texas, and then was serving in Tennessee, but was not canonically resident here. And it was kind of like, I want to be, involved in, larger diocesan ministry in the place where I'm living and serving, but I'm canonically resident elsewhere. So eventually that all lined up.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking. The reason I brought that up was I was thinking that on some level, what I like about our tradition is that we do. I think in our tradition, there is a culture of dialogue and conversation, which is a polite way of saying argument and disagreement, right? But like the idea that just because you said it doesn't mean one person said it doesn't mean it's true. Mm-hmm. And so on one hand, having a space where a priest can talk to people and there can be some interaction and interchange is one level of that. But they're still only hearing from one clergy person, or like they're asking me questions and I'm like, oh, well, let me give you my take on that. But the full Episcopal experience would really be them asking two of us and then watching us like actually be like, well, I don't know, like, hold on a second. Like, that's actually much more Episcopalian in my mind, right? I was introduced to the Episcopal Church by a church that had a couple of priests, and I had 4 priests. It was a bigger Episcopal church. And there's some benefits and some drawbacks to that, of course, as there are. Any size comes with goods and the bads. The good was my introduction was to different voices right out of the gates. And I really liked that. And so I still think like that. Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. Well, I'm going to ask you questions, but to those of you who are here and are watching, and if you are in the live chat, which I love, or if you, for whatever reason, are not able to do the live chat, but you are able to send me a Facebook message, please ask us any questions that you'd like us to answer, or any questions that you'd like Kira to answer. And we'll have our own conversation for sure, but we're not going to just, I was kidding at the beginning when I said, we're going to talk like you're not here. You are here with us. And that's always been an important part of this. So we've never done this before, Kira. We've never had another person on. So I want to make sure that I pay that like we pay right attention to each other, but also that we pay the right amount of attention to our folks who are with us. And so we're gonna screw that up a lot. And we're gonna get it right by messing up a lot. So but if y'all have questions for us, you're gonna then just send them in the text me or send them in the side, and then we'll see how we do with them. So should we start easy?
Sure. Yeah.
So you wrote a book about abortion.
Yeah. I did. Yeah.
This is an area that is very unsettled for me. So let's take a break from it and go over to Leslie's question, and we're going to come back to it. Leslie asks with an easy, because we will start with an easy question, and then I want to talk about your book. What is your least favorite thing about the Episcopal Church?
Ooh.
You start.
Gosh. I think as a clergy person, as opposed to somebody in the pews, I think we get a little bit more of a glimpse at sort of the institution and the machinations of the institution.
Right.
In a way that like I don't think a lot of my congregation is like particularly that interested, or doesn't impact their sort of daily life on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know, I would say particularly right now, like in this moment, the kind of bloat of the institution in a way, that has like kind of from the top down, that has prevented us from kind of having a lot of being able to pivot or easily to even things like, we all sort of pivoted to online worship sort of because we had to.
There's so much that we changed because we had no choice.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we do have the choice, it's hard to get a lot of change done.
Yeah.
I'd also say one of my least favorite things in the Episcopal Church right now, and this is maybe going to be a little bit controversial, and it's certainly not only the Episcopal Church that is at fault with this, but the sort of lack of younger voices and the sort of lifting up of younger voices, both lay and clergy. This isn't just like,
right,
I'm a young clergy person and I want to be in charge, but and this is true. And if you look at our government, Congress, like the age of the people in charge, and there's certainly a place for wisdom and there's a place for experience. And I just wish we had a little bit better of a balance of that wisdom and experience with sort of like younger energy and new ideas.
I like that. Yeah. There's not a real good mechanism in place for actually listening to new ideas and new people. So I have like a new answer and an old answer. Both are true, right? Like my new answer is like, the casual white supremacy, like, and the casual sort of heteronormativity and patriarchal nature of the church that has totally helped me get where I am, like, from which I've benefited greatly, at least in the worldly sense. And I wouldn't have, like, I think I'm still learning how to talk about it, and I don't want to sound like I'm such a, like, this great warrior who understands all this or whatever. I don't feel that way at all. I feel very much like things have been, like, the ground is, like, the rug has been pulled from underneath my understanding of a lot of things about this church that I love. Not this one, the church. But the Episcopal Church falls into that category really strongly. So like the idea of like, well, like what we consider to be right worship, which happens to fit a very specific model that is really, really white, and things like that I'm struggling with. But that's like my newer answer that I'm still developing. So I feel like I'm still working on how I feel about that and what to do with that. My actual answer is like, or the one that I'm like used to thinking about and that I've thought a lot about is like, I don't like that Episcopalians don't generally know how to or like talking about Jesus. Because Jesus is why I'm Christian. Like, and Jesus is why we're all Christian by definition. But like, the sort of discomfort in the name of Jesus, and the casual sort of the non-event it is when someone complains, never to me but to someone else, that I talk about Jesus too much in my sermons. So it doesn't happen all the time, but I did have one guy actually say it to my face, thank God. He was like, I probably would come more, but you just talk about Jesus too much. If you could talk about other things, I might come more. And I was like, then I guess I will see you on Christmas and Easter. I wish you the best. I wish I could come up with a loophole for you here, but we're about this thing. That really bothers me. And it's connected to another thing that's sort of like the Episcopalian mentality of describing what we are by talking about all the things we aren't. So we identify with ourselves not in the particular way in which we follow Jesus, but in the way that we're not like other Christians.
Yeah.
And I find that to be really snobbish, which is weird because I usually like snobbish things.
Oh, that's Episcopalian, because I'm just snobbish at heart.
Right?
It's not a thing I like about myself, but
right. Like I don't like it, but I don't know if I'm going to change it anytime soon. It is a hard working, and it's a fine line between trying to be a truth teller and just being kind of snobby about things. Mm-hmm. Like there was a couple years ago, I'm gonna go straight for the third rail here. There was a couple years ago when I took a I publicly flogged the song "Mary, Did You Know," and made my distaste for the song clear. Mm-hmm. And I was making that claim, of course, from a theological standpoint of course she knew. Like Mary's a prophet of God. Like she knows.
Also an angel like literally told her.
Literally, like, Mary, did you know? We know she knew. The way we're introduced to Mary is that an angel shows up and freaking. So I was complaining, right? But then people were like, yeah, but isn't the music beautiful? And I was like, no, it's garbage. I hate the music too. And which I do. And then at some point, like one of my parishioners messaged me and she was just sort of like, you're kind of being a mean girl right now, Phil. Like some of us just really like it and we could just like it and that would be okay. Mm-hmm. Which good for her for saying it to me, right? And so there I am thinking that I'm like fighting for the cause. And really, I'm just being a musical snob and a theological snob. So that's a tough road, I think.
I think that's certainly a journey, and I think it's also been a journey for me of like I can hold my opinions and my convictions very strongly, and also kind of allow other people to have their things as long as they're not like damaging or
right.
And just kind of like what kind of language am I allowed to use?
Right. Oh, here?
Yes.
That's up to you. I've never dropped an F-bomb on this.
Okay. Well, there's a lovely little a very short little video song that goes, "It's okay to not like things. It's okay, but don't be a dick about it." Yeah,
right. No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I'm not sure I've ever said that on the show, but you know what? I think we're cool. I think it's a PG-13 show and everyone knows that, like that language. But that's right. I mean, that's really the thing is like, and I've often quoted The Big Lebowski when you've seen The Big Lebowski, everybody in our generation has, whether we like it or not. But there's the scene when when Walter, John Goodman's character, pulls the gun out at the bowling alley, and then afterwards they're getting in the car, and the dude is just so mad at Walter, and he's like, "We do go to the next round of the round robin, do we not? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I wrong?" And finally the dude goes, "You're not wrong, Walter. You're just an asshole."
Yeah.
And that to me is like, so often we would rather be the a-hole. That's more like we'll be a-holes trying to prove that we're not wrong and how right we are. And I wonder sometimes, as someone who's married, how much easier my marriage would be if I chose trying. My dad once said to me when I was a teenager, Phil, sometime you'll have to decide, would you rather be right or be happy? And I said, both. Like, I want to be happy about being right.
Yes.
Like immediately, like it wasn't even, I had to think about it. Like it was like immediate answer. Right. And I'm like, no, I mean, and now I'm like, how much easier would my marriage be if I was more interested in being happy than being right? I may never find out.
The world may never know.
So, okay, we have questions on the side. Well, one is Leslie's point. Can you see the questions?
Yes.
So Leslie says, the things that we don't, when we talk about being Episcopalian, is the things that we aren't. That's uncomfortably true, but it's really hard to identify, she says. It's really hard to identify as Christian and not be shot down without saying, oh, but I'm not that kind of Christian. I promise I will actually listen to and love you. And that's in her experiences recently. And we'll get to the next question after that. But what, just a little context, Kira, Leslie, I don't think I'm saying anything that you haven't said already, Leslie. Leslie's talked in the past about, just she finds herself on the margins of sort of like kind of a status quo society in a lot of different ways. And she finds herself happy to be there with people, but like being a Christian in those spaces with others who have been marginalized and hurt by people within the sort of normative culture. You find yourself wanting to say, I'm not that, right? I mean, I know that too. I know that when I'm around people that I know have been marginalized or harmed by church, I find myself like awkwardly wanting to try to say a thing to let them know that like, we're okay. I'm not that.
Can I like do a sign that like, it's like, I'm a cool Christian. I'm not like,
Right. This means I accept you, but like, we've also chosen to wear these things or chosen to call ourselves Christian, knowing that we're taking on the baggage of an organization and a body that has harmed people in Jesus' name. And yeah. That's a messy territory. I don't always know how to handle it.
It is. No. And so my husband is, sort of was raised unchurched, was not really, didn't know much about the church or about Christians, just kind of what he had heard through, on the news or the media or like from people talking or whatever. And when we met and we started dating and everything, he was like, like I sort of figured there were probably like other kinds of Christians out there besides the ones that you hear about on, in the news or whatever, but like, yeah. I never really met one.
Right. Right. I've heard tale.
I know. So I think some of what we can do to kind of counteract that is just like be who we are and sort of demonstrate that with the way we live our lives, to have people kind of then go like, oh, but you're a Christian, but these people over here who are like protesting funerals or, have bullhorns at the gay pride parade. Like, how are these people Christian, but also you're at the gay pride parade in your collar and
right.
And just being that witness to people. I think that was challenging for me. My first time I went to Pride as a clergy person, like at the time I was like, gosh, I'm Episcopalian. Like all the other clergy I know are like affirming and supportive. And this is like a big part of like who we are as a denomination, even though there are a lot of individual churches and, such that are not. But I was like, everybody knows, right, that there are like a lot of clergy and churches out there that are affirming. But the number of people that kind of came up to me and were like, I can't believe you're here. Like thank you so much for like being here. Really changed my perspective on that. And I was like, oh, I really am kind of in sometimes a bubble of like affirming or progressive.
We are very far in the minority. We are very far in the minority, especially in terms of LGBTQ plus acceptance and acceptance isn't the best word, but affirmation and especially on a theological and structural level that it's present in our totally. And so I think the second time I went to one, I wore my cassock. And I had a big sign that my wife had made, and I mean big, that said, "You are a blessing." And I didn't walk in the parade, but I stood on the side and I held that sign up. And I had so many people, especially people in the parade. And I mean, like guys in like leather studded like chaps and stuff, like come over to me and hug me and thank me, or like saw guys like, and people, I remember I saw this one like drag queen on a float, like just like full on Priscilla Queen of the Desert, like regalia, like amazing, like see me. And like they were doing the thing, like saw me and like stopped. And like, I don't remember what they did, but like some kind of gesture of like, you know, like, thank you. And you realize you're like, oh yeah, like it's not obvious to a lot of people.
No.
And so I wonder, like, I don't know. I mean, part of what we can do is just keep showing up. And then I think, and then here's the tricky part. I think one of the things, it's like the prayer attributed to St. Francis, grant that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand. I think a lot of times we're struggling really because we want to be understood. And sometimes there's strength in being like, I know you're not going to understand me right now. I don't always understand me, but I'm going to try to understand you instead and put the focus back out on loving the other person. And that might be a way that we can be evangelistic in the world and be a Christian presence. And people will be like, I don't like Christians, and just be like, I get it. Instead of saying like, me neither, my gut reaction is to be like, yeah, me neither. Christians are terrible. But just be like, I get it. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the things that Christians have done. And then I also think that like people like you and I have to we got to go toe to toe with other Christians, like other Christian leaders. We need to stand up and speak with them, but speak towards them and like be willing to say like that. This is yours is not the only Christian voice.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. I don't know. J828. I don't know who that is. Hi, J. I don't know how to pronounce it. Jatwit. The J is silent. Does the skittishness with talking about Jesus prevent effective evangelism? I mean, the easy answer is yes, but like, oh yeah, of course it does. Moving on. But there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah, I think especially as somebody who Phil, I don't even know if I knew like where you grew up.
Oh, so I grew up in the beautiful county of Orange in California, and I belonged to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Yes.
Yeah, and I was born in a different denomination, but when I was 4 or so, we joined that church, and I was there up until I was 16. That was a major formative part of my upbringing in Orange County, California.
Yeah. So you were sort of culturally in like a more conservative Christian
politically and theologically conservative, yes.
And I grew up in Texas and now live in Tennessee, so I'm very like intimately familiar with sort of more theologically and politically conservative spaces for sure. Sometimes I joke that I like can speak evangelical, even though I have never really been evangelical or like, but it was just so much in the water of like, especially even though I didn't go to an evangelical church or grew up evangelical, like I was very steeped in like purity culture in the 90s and the aughts, like even though that was even though I wasn't like evangelical. So I think a lot, especially when I talk to people about evangelism in my circles, like a lot of it is that discomfort with like, well, but we don't want to be like those Christians.
Right.
Like, we don't want to be like the people that put up billboards that say like, if you died today, where are you going?
Right.
And that discomfort with the association of Jesus with like that kind of theological worldview or that kind of Christianity. And then it kind of, so then what as the Episcopal Church, like, what are we offering then if not Jesus or a way of following Jesus? And I think that's a lot of my congregation are people, well, and a lot of Episcopalians generally are people that were not raised in the Episcopal Church. And so they have or have suffered some kind of, whatever tradition you might come out of, like that was not maybe a healthy tradition, or even potentially spiritually abusive. And to still, like, for me, the like call of the gospel in those people's lives to follow Jesus, even though the church has been so damaging, that they have made their way then to a church where they can do that, I think is a really powerful witness for the Episcopal Church. Not in a way that's like, oh, we're not like those Christians, but like, this is a safe place where people can still like follow Jesus and experience, God, and like deepen their walk with Christ. That also like isn't damaging.
Which I think goes to that idea. We don't have to say we're not these other things, but it goes to the point of it's important for us to be able to say what we are, and then let people decide if it's different or not. Right? Like, we don't have to say we're different than the other people's. We just say this is what we believe in, and then people can decide if that feels different enough for them. I don't know if that makes sense, but by the way, J828's name is Josh. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the show. And Peter's joining us for the first time. If it's my old friend Peter from California, I think it is. Some use talking about Jesus. He was on, if it's the Peter I think it is, he was on my discernment, my lay discernment, or my discernment committee before I became to become a priest, my parish discernment committee. No big deal. Okay. Some use talking about Jesus and other Christian words as exclusionary, code talking, which does not bring people in. Jesus asked open-ended questions. Who do you say I am? Drew in sand with sticks. Different Peter. You're Peter.
Oh, hi, Peter.
You can claim this, Peter. Hi, Peter. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. So I heard of that, Peter. I've heard of that as being referred to as Christianese. And that evangelical speak you're talking about. And I had a similar experience, Kira, like, the church in which I grew up did not self-identify as evangelical because it was a Lutheran church, but it was Missouri Synod, which is very, very rigid. I have a hard time with the word conservative, because I feel like if we were really conservative, we'd be like the Orthodox. Like if we were actually conservative Christians, we'd be doing it in a different tongue, or we'd be, like following Jesus.
Those labels are so tricky, because there's a lot about the church that I want to conserve that I
totally. So it's almost like in the politically conservative sort of marriage between political conservatism and nationalism, as we're seeing sort of lived out in a really, really obvious way right now. But it was always there. We just didn't necessarily weren't as cognizant of it. But it was always funny because they would always the pastors at the church would be like, well, at least we're not those evangelicals. And then I'd look and I'd be like, we kind of are though. Like, we believe all the same stuff. I grew up in a school where my 5th grade teacher didn't believe that dinosaurs were real because they weren't in the Bible. And I was like, I raised my hand, I was like, but did you just say dinosaurs weren't real? And he's like, of course not. And I was like, but why? I'm 10 years old, Kira. I'm 10 years old. And I go, why? And he goes, well, they're not in the Bible. And I go, well, I'm not in the Bible, but I exist. Right. And he's like, oh no, but, and I was like, wait a minute. Not kidding. I remember saying this. I go, but what about the fossils and the bones? And he goes, well, don't you think God could have put those in the ground? And I said, of course he could have. He's God, because I was raised to believe God could do anything. And I still, actually, that's one I held on to. And I'm like, yeah, but why would he? And he said, to test our faith. Right. And my actual response, he said, don't you think God could do that? And my response was, yes, I just don't think God is that kind of a jerk. And that's when I got sent out of class. And that's when I got home from school and my mom was like, so the principal called me today. And I was like, but it's like, I was raised in that kind of thinking, but that's a separate question. I mean, so I know that kind of thing, but like, yes, there's a language that's used, it's coded. But I would say that once you get into liturgical Christianity, like the Episcopal Church, Anglican tradition, some other Lutheran traditions, Roman Catholic or Orthodox, we have our own fancy language and insider coded stuff that's just as, it's kind of even more obnoxious in its own way, but it's at least it's older.
Yeah, I know.
But I remember writing an article once, or writing something on Facebook. What's the difference anymore? Where I said something like Episcopalians don't care. They really don't care if you are, they really don't care if you like if you're Republican or Democrat, if you're this or that, like they don't care how you feel. We make a point of being this big broad tent, but like, by God, if you take your Christmas tree down before Epiphany, right? Like, or Episcopalians are like, I can't believe people are singing all these Christmas songs. It's Advent. And you're just like, can we like not right now, So I don't know.
If there would have been a thing that would have driven me out of the church, and I say this with all love and respect for people that are involved in this ministry, it would have been my interactions with people on the altar guild.
Oh, yeah. Because that's so inside, like that's like deep inside.
And when you get to altar guild, like I got yelled at for lighting the candles in the wrong order.
Right.
Somebody as a teenager yelled at me for wearing the wrong shoes.
Right. And from that degree to that degree, since I've become an Episcopalian, at least at the churches at which I've worked, I've always worked at churches that had a kinder, gentler altar guild, including the one we have now. They've always been some of like my best and closest friends and colleagues in the work. But I have come to places, my first job, like the rector said to the altar guild, I mean, obviously you have this work to do and it's important work and we love it. It means a lot to us. Your main work is taking care of each other. And if you're not doing that, then the rest doesn't matter. And that was sort of like the way that the altar guild was shaped. And so sure, they had like really particular opinions about the way things should be, but they also had this like really pastoral sensibility that was built into them because that's the culture that was created. But when that's not there, then it can really easily become about making sure everything's done just right. Mm-hmm. And if it's not done right, it's like bad taste equals bad theology.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always, sometimes I'll have altar guild members kind of like approach me with fear and trembling and to ask me, a question about a preference or whatever. And like a lot of times I'm just kind of like, whatever happens, like God's going to be glorified.
Right.
No matter what we do,
right,
God's going to be glorified. And if something's in the wrong place or I don't have what I need, like we'll figure it out. Like it's okay.
Yeah.
We're not putting on a show, we're worshiping.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a colleague here when I first got here who would say, nothing perfect but God, right? Like we're going to get anytime we'd make a mistake, she'd be like, well, nothing's perfect but God. And it's certainly not the bulletin, right? Certainly not the bulletin. And so, yeah, we mess up a lot. And no, but I do think we have that capacity to kind of get into coded language. And when I think about like what it means to I don't know, like the emphasis on evangelism as making more people Christian is a really, I don't know, like there's something that doesn't, like that's not what the good news was.
Right.
Like I always, it hit me, I forget I figured it out as an adult, I mean like since like post-seminary, like when it might've been I think it might be in Mark coming up, but like when it talked about Jesus went around preaching the good news, well, he hadn't died yet and he wasn't telling people to be Christian.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the good news. So when Jesus talked about the good news, it wasn't believe in Jesus so you can go to heaven, become a Christian. Those weren't the things he was saying. So then what was the good news? Right? And it usually started with repent, which is always awesome when good news starts with repent. But like if you think about, we look at that and we think the good news is that, essentially the good news is what the prophet Jeremiah says, I will be your God and you will be my people. Like that you are belonging, that you belong and in God's heart in life. and that God belongs in your heart and life, and that there is not dependence on God's part, but there's a relational aspect there that's real, where your presence is valued, and you as you are in on the God reality and on the love life of love. When I don't know what to do, I just say love a lot. But like that's the good news, and we don't need to convince people to become Christian for us to try to convey that reality to people.
Yeah, I would say sort of my theology of grace and action in the world is that, like, I can't actually make anyone Christian. Like,
right.
That's God. That's God's work in people's lives.
Right.
But I can sort of help move people along on that path, or I can share where I see God working in the world, or I can share the difference that being a Christian has made in my life, and the way, you know, I see the way it sort of makes my life and the way I live make sense is through the Christian story. But I can't, like, I can share that with people. I can talk to them about it. I can invite people to church or whatever, but like, I'm not actually in the business of making people Christians. That's God.
Right.
That's God.
It's above our pay grade.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the Holy Spirit, whether or not that happens to someone. Like I think I was only really active in Al-Anon for 2 years, but it was a very formative 2 years for me. It was, I just started ministry ordained ministry, and just been married for just a couple years, and I had just had a baby. So it was just this like really heady, like full time. And one of the things that was really formative for me in Al-Anon was this overarching reality that kept being brought up. Like, you cannot decide, you don't get to decide what other people think or what they want, or you can't convince people. You know, it comes from like the idea of trying to teach the family or friend of an alcoholic that you can't convince them to stop drinking. Actually, it's not that you shouldn't, it's that you can't. It's not something if they choose to or not, or if God pulls them out of that hole, or whatever language you want to use around it, that's like wherever they hit rock bottom, that's between them and their higher power. You have no say in it. And like, that's been really helpful in terms of my preaching and teaching, in terms of my vocation, for me to be like, my job isn't to make you anything. Like, I'm not here to make you anything. Right? Like, I'm here to just sort of, really to proclaim the good news in thought, word, and deed. And then let the chips fall to some degree, which is, I don't know, was helpful for me. Mm-hmm. When did you realize like that when did you start to get like the tap? Like, oh, I might be a priest?
So I was 16, I was young, or like 15, 16. And it was when I was very active in the Methodist Church. And I remember I was sitting up in the choir loft because I sang with the youth choir.
This was in the Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A very large church
in Texas.
And, I remember seeing the senior pastor up in the pulpit preaching, and there was just this little voice that said, like, I wonder if I could do that. Man. Like, and that was the first little like, like urging.
Yep.
And, as I mentioned, like, I had a family member, my great uncle, who was basically like a grandfather to me, who was an Episcopal priest. So I never had this conception of like clergy as being sort of above it all, or like particularly like holy, or, I mean, my great uncle, like, he watched Wheel of Fortune and, like, ate pizza and did like normal people stuff. So that kind of made it a little more, I guess, like accessible to me. And I'm really grateful for that Methodist church that I was a part of, which I didn't realize at the time, but like, I had kind of started asking some questions about like, what does that look like? Like, what is being a minister? And the senior pastor of this very, very large Methodist church set aside time to meet with me, like a little, a teenager, and just let me kind of ask questions about what did he do the rest of the week when he wasn't, in church on Sunday? And like, what was being a pastor like, and that was supported in a way that I didn't. I don't think I quite realized at the time, but I'm really grateful for the time and the energy that he gave to kind of just letting a parishioner, a congregant ask questions. I wasn't a big donor. I wasn't a big, like.
You were the trust fund 16-year-old just bankrolling the church. Man, I love that. First of all, isn't it cool when you look back on something and realize how gracious someone was being to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the first things that I really liked about you was like, I would look back on conversations we had and be like, oh, I was the recipient of grace. Awesome. I will take note of that and try not to take it for granted. So it's one of those really beautiful things. I remember having the similar moment in church, but it was when I'd become Episcopalian, watching the person up there and being like, I could do that. Yeah. And it was just like, wait, what? Oh, hold on, right? Like, I'm not sure about that. Leslie has finally asked the question about not the elephant in the room, but the skeleton in the room. I was wondering when someone would ask a question about it.
I know.
So it's all you, buddy. I have my thoughts, but I would love to hear how you talk about this.
Okay. So this is my skeleton friend. His name is Memento Mori. A few years ago, this is going to sound weird. I started getting into death.
Sure.
And I think part of it was born out of some of my work as a chaplain and doing hospice stuff, and just having hard conversations around death and the dying process that I think a lot of people are very hungry to have, because for so long they've been avoided. And as people have experienced either loved ones or whatever in kind of the dying process, having to sometimes make those hard choices about, like, do we move to hospice care? Do we kind of do a full court press in trying to heal? And the way our medical system is set up for the most part is designed to heal sort of at all costs.
At all costs.
And sometimes that
death is like you lost.
Exactly.
Right. It's a win or lose game. And if you lose, you've died. If you die, that means you've lost.
Yes. And and that's just not true, because death is part of being
a person,
a fallible, frail human being in our world before the second coming and the resurrection of the dead.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of a reclaiming of medieval traditions on focusing on memento mori itself is Latin for remember your death, or remember that you're going to die.
Right.
And I think particularly in this moment in our culture, it's been a really helpful thing to kind of come back to, because I think we're all very aware of the precariousness of life in a way that maybe we weren't before. And as we get kind of like sheltered and insulated ourselves from that reality through technology and medicine and all of these other things that are great. And I'm so glad that we have them. But it also, as a spiritual practice, to kind of like, it's a little bit carpe diem, a little bit sort of like get right, make sure you're right with God.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Every day is eternity. Like every day is the day, right?
Yeah.
I love it. And I remember the first time that something like that, what you're describing, dawned on me was through one of our modern prophets, Norm Macdonald, who told this joke about, some of his jokes don't even sound like jokes, but they just sit with you. And he was talking about how when people die of cancer, they say they lost their battle to cancer. And he was like, so that means the last thing I was a loser? Like the very last thing I did in life was lose? Like, he's like, can we can we change that? I've tried to, by the way, work this into a sermon 2 separate times at 2 different churches. It has not worked. It has fallen completely flat. I tried so hard to make it funny, but it's like the funniest thing to me. And it's also the most like when it hit me, I was like, oh my God, that's completely how we talk about death, that we've lost. And people are supposed to valiantly battle something and then lose the battle. And I don't know. There's just something to that where the idea is that the way you win is by never dying. Right.
Yeah. And I do think we do at least in like our burial service as the Episcopal Church and everything, we talk about death in a fairly different way than kind of the rest of culture talks about death. And I don't know about you, but that has like, I've had some friction with like funeral homes over that.
Yes.
Like our practices around it say something very specific theologically about death and kind of what we mean it to be. But I also, one of the reasons I kind of like am a little bit jokey about death, even though it's, obviously grief, when we lose a loved one, it's very hard. I don't mean to make light of that at all, but that ultimately, like, we believe in resurrection, and so death doesn't have the final say. And so we can kind of like make fun of it a little bit, or, you can say like, you don't have any power, like death is not the final power. Jesus is the final power. And so that kind of also colors like a little bit of my joking around about skeletons. And
have you I'm going to say her name wrong, I think, but have you read, I think her name is Caitlin Doughty.
Mm-hmm.
I read her first book, Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. My friend Sarah convinced me to read that, Tales from the Crematorium. Phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, she's doing a lot of that work around kind of the good death, from kind of a more secular.
It's very secular. Mm-hmm. It's very secular, but it's profoundly spiritual in my mind, and it connects me. Like when I read it, I'm like, it's one of those times where you're reading someone who is non-religious, writing from a non-religious perspective, and you wish you could say to them, like, it's one of those times where you're like, I'm with you, actually, like we're on the same team here. But it is, they're like, I don't care, you could be, that's fine, the constant Christian, American Christian thinking that it's in like validating to others when we like them, but they're like, we're fine without you. But her stuff is really, really good. And I think you're right. I mean, it's both, but also like the dark stuff is, to me, what you're supposed to laugh at.
Yeah.
Like I remember when they were carting my dad's body down the stairs he died in my grandma's house, and he was upstairs. And so they had to carry him down. And there's the body like going, and I'm, this is the most traumatic day of my life. My dad's death, unquestionably. Not like there's no like close second. It's like the most traumatic day. And I can, to the degree I can like remember it, like I can remember the whole day, right? It's like seared. So they're carrying my dad's body down the stairs, and my brother looks over at me and he goes, I guess that's why they call it dead weight. Isn't that awesome? Like, it's so good. Like, I was like, that is awesome. Like, that's my family. There's a bunch of stuff around it. When he got sick, one of my brothers specifically, the other brother and I would joke about it all the time because we were so scared of him dying. Like, we didn't want him to die. So I'd call him and I'd be like, hey, and he'd be like, is dad dead? I'm like, yep, he's dead. I just called to let you know. And he'd be like, what did you really call about? And then we'd talk about whatever we called to talk about. And we would do this all the time because we were scared of him dying, because we adored and loved this man. And so we just joked about the death that was imminent. So, but then he died and I had to call my brother.
Oh gosh. And
I didn't know how to tell him because we joked about it so much that when it actually was time, that it actually happened. So the way that I had to tell my brother, a guy's like, where are you? And he's like, I'm with whatever. I was like, I need you to be alone. And he's like, oh, okay, hold on. And he goes into another room. And I go, Dad's dead and I'm not kidding. That's what I had to say. That's how I had to tell him. This is probably darker than we thought the show was going to go today. But like, so I guess I bring it up to say your skeleton, your embracing of humor around this it resonates with me deeply. And it's like I was the one person in the movie theater, a full movie theater, when in the movie Fargo, when the foot is sticking out of the wood chipper and the guy's like takes the log and tries to stomp it down. I'm laughing hysterically. No, dead silent movie theater, Orange County, California, 1997 or 1996. So there you go. But like, for me, it's not because I don't respect life or respect death or fear it or any of that stuff. Like it's not out of a lack of, I don't know. It's almost like no, I get it. You're really dark and like this thing is really scary and uncertain. You will not take my humor away and you will not take my joy away. And there's a resistance to the sadness and the sorrow and the darkness. But we've chosen to, I think, I'll speak for us both and you can tell me if I'm wrong. We've chosen to like, the way that we resist it is not by denying or ignoring, but by standing at the void and laughing, which is its own kind of, I think, has its own kind of power. But I was raised in that kind of darkness. There's a lot of downside to that. Like there are times when I should be a little bit less like that. But it's given like me and my brothers like some strength and we were able to, it was a way that we were able to navigate our own grief and sorrow, you know? So your skeleton is, I don't know, a huge joy for me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, not only personally, but also as a minister, we're often at these extremely holy moments with people and with families, either on the verge of death or with families kind of immediately after death. And those are so, those really animate my ministry in terms of what I really feel called to, and where, if I'm being a little selfish, where I feel I'm important and where like the work that I do is important.
Yes.
And so that kind of, it's not, it becomes sort of a little bit of a focus of my ministry because unfortunately we kind of end up doing it a lot. And I'm around death maybe more than most people. And so I have a little bit more of a comfort with it than
even calling it death. Like even talking about death instead of passing on or going to the next place or whatever, like our service is called a burial service. Mm-hmm. And when people are like, it's a celebration of life, I'm like, I mean, you're not wrong. We are celebrating life. And also it's a burial service because someone has died, And I actually think that, and I mean, the prayers in our burial service are the ones that like make me believe in God.
Oh yeah.
I mean the opening anthem. But even at the grave, we make our, at the end, when we say, even at the grave, we make our song, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The prayer of commendation. You find yourself in this position where you are trying to articulate the reality of both death and resurrection for a people who are in the midst of grief and great loss. And that is unquestionably like one of the great privileges of our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Right.
And kind of circling back to the evangelism conversation, I mean, funerals are often where you have people in the congregation who are not churchgoers, who maybe were not even church, not really familiar with the Christian witness or the Christian story. And that funeral service just on its own, without anything that I might say from the pulpit, that will preach. Like, why does it matter that we're Christians? This is when it really matters that we're Christians. And that service does such a good job of distilling that in that awful moment of grief and loss, that we still believe in a Savior who has conquered death.
I'm with you. We have 2 minutes left.
And we didn't even talk about abortion.
I know. No, that's what here's the 2 minutes. First, let me start by saying, will you come back on the show again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Good. So the next time you come back, we're going to take next week off. And then the week after that, I'd love to have you back. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to read your book before we talk again. I have it. I just have it's one of those, it's like in my stack of like, I'm gonna read that. And then I do the thing like, oh, my friend wrote this, but it just sits there. So I want to read your book because I don't want to talk to you about it when I haven't done my homework. I don't think it's fair. But you wrote a book. Can you tell everyone the name of your book?
Yeah, the name is Pro-Choice and Christian, Reconciling Faith, Politics, and Justice.
Pro-Choice and Christian, Reconciling Faith, Politics, and Justice. So you wrote a book about what it means to be Christian. I assume then to be Christian and pro-choice.
Yes.
Okay.
How I arrived at being pro-choice from a Christian.
Did you grow up pro-choice?
I would say yes. I mean, it wasn't something we really talked about a lot,
right.
But yeah.
So I grew up very explicitly pro-life, very clearly and adamantly the whole bit. So it's it still feels very new to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking for, and I've had more in the last like 6 months, I've had more people come up to me and be like, what's the Episcopal Church's stance? What do they think? What are you all like? Where are we in this? There's the progressive assumption that we're pro-choice. Mm-hmm. And from a legislative standpoint, the Episcopal Church is, but I'm guessing it's a little murkier than that, or a little bit more complicated, I should say, than that within the Episcopal Church. Do you get into the Episcopal Church's stuff around that in your book?
I kind of cover not only kind of the Episcopal Church's official statement about it, but other kind of mainline denominations and such as well, because I do think for me, it was a little bit of the opposite of what you're describing. Like I kind of grew up pro-choice sort of unquestioningly. And then as I kind of, got deeper into my faith and deeper into sort of like, what does being a Christian mean for my politics and my ethics and all of that? I started to think it was maybe a little bit more complicated than, kind of the way sometimes people talk about abortion. And that's kind of how and why I ended up writing the book, because I think there are a lot of folks that are in that, our culture and our politics kind of want to divide us and put us in column A or column B. And a lot of people are kind of like, well, I think that people should have access to reproductive care, but like, how do we also support life and support, families? And I mean, I am not a mother, but like I love children. I love my friends' children. I want everybody who wants to have a baby to have one and feel supported in that. And looking at kind of the
just children, like they're humans too, like they grow up at some point.
Yeah.
Not sure how I feel about them once they do that. But like, yeah, it's like I support humanity and human life, but there's a lot there. Mm-hmm. Man, okay. Well, I'm going to read the book, but I get 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's not like this thick.
No, it's an easy read.
It's a thinner book. And I do have a copy of it, so I'm going to read that. So you'll come back and join us and we can talk more about it. And I want to really, I want to talk. I want to learn and I want to ask questions. So to all of the folks who are with us today, thank you for being with us. I hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks, not next week, but the week after. Kira's coming back. We're going to talk about lighthearted issues like abortion and Christianity. Listen, we joked about death today, I think, and added new words to our show's lexicon in terms of expletives. So really, the sky's the limit for the two of us. Well, I think so. I definitely think there's going to be some people who are like, you went a little too far for me, Phil, today. But whatever. Look, if you're watching here, if you're part of our crew, you know that we love you. I love you guys so much. And by the way, I hope everyone has a really happy Thanksgiving. And I hope that you celebrate that Thanksgiving by not seeing anybody outside of your home and by not doing anything risky. That's my hope. There's my actual hope. Before we go, Kira, what have you been listening to lately?
What have I been listening to lately? I've been kind of listening to a lot of comfort music. I don't know.
Yes. That's exactly where I am. So I did a little bit of a revisit of Tori Amos's Little Earthquake. Oh, buddy.
And I still know every lyric.
Oh, buddy. Man, what was it like being a teenager ginger Christian when she showed up on the scene for you?
Oh, man. My musical wheelhouse is like sad emo lady singers. And I will say that like right now, contemporary music has a lot to offer in that realm as well.
It does.
So I'm very grateful for like this moment.
This is why I got to get you deeper into Gillian Welch.
Yeah.
I saw her last studio album was called The Harrow and the Harvest. And I saw her a week after that came out. And she said that one reviewer referred to it as it's 10 songs. And she said that they referred to it as, first of all, they called it acoustic slowcore. And then they said that it was 10 songs and it representing 10 different kinds of sadness. And I was like, oh, this is my jam.
Yes.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Phoebe Bridgers released a cover of Merle Haggard's If We Make It Through December.
Oh!
It's,
so
it's
this
the whole mood for right now.
This crew knows, and my comfort has been going older and older and older. And so getting into really like early like 20s, like going, I'm not that it's stuff that first of all, nothing new. I can't handle new. So there's some newer music, but it has to sound enough like the old music that I can handle it because of the comfort thing. Because I need to be in a space of comfort because everything's so hard right now. But I've mentioned it repeatedly on the show. That Verve Records put out this box set of Ella Fitzgerald called The Complete Piano Duets, and it's just her singing and someone on the piano, and it's 2.5 hours of that. And I have it on Spotify. I mean, you can get it on whatever music subscription. I was listening to it right before I called you. Like I listened to it. I've been listening to it kind of nonstop for the last 8 months. I've sprinkled in other things, but like me and Ella and I, in the last 9 months, it's been like really, there's been this thing that's happened because I've always liked her, but now it's like she's in my head in a completely different way, and it's totally for comfort, right? So that's where I'm at, and you're doing so Phoebe Bridgers, all right, and who's her? Someone just told me about someone named Kathleen Adams.
Ooh.
Sounds like such a normal name. Like it couldn't possibly be dark and scary. Kathleen Edwards. Kathleen Edwards. I need to check her out. They were told me, same vein, a lot of Brandi Carlile.
Yeah.
How do you not? John Prine, the whole bit. Peter's getting into the Motown. I agree, Peter. I mean, I'll go back to Otis Redding and just stay with him for a day, or Sam Cooke, obviously, because I like soul music. But all right, we are now past midnight.
Fleetwood Mac on our road trip from Florida. That was not one of mine growing up, and so now I've never really gotten into them. But I do not begrudge others the love. For me, it would be like Bon Jovi. Like if I could put on the Bon Jovi New Jersey album or Slippery When Wet, I would be like, here we go. And then I listened to it once and I'm like, all right, got it. Never mind. But yeah. Fleetwood Mac, good stuff. As you can tell, we go as long as we want, but we are going to wrap up. So to everyone who's been with us, thank you. I hope you have the happiest of Thanksgivings. Kira, this is so great to have you on this show. So fun.
Leslie tells us to listen to a band called The Double Clicks. So we'll check out, I'll listen to The Double Clicks while reading Kira's book. That's my plan.
It's your week off plan.
And Kira, I'm not going to hang up on you, but I'm going to hang up on everybody else and we're going to check in with each other. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much. Much love. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye now. All right.